Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Hi, I'm Althea Brooks, and I'm Senior Director of Lifetime Learning in the Office of Engagement. It's a pleasure to welcome you here in person at Newcomb Hall and around the world. So welcome, everybody. This year marks a milestone for More Than the Score. We're celebrating 20 years. Can you believe it? 20 years. Very special thanks to the Lifetime Learning team who plans and makes this event happen each Saturday morning before the home football games. We have one final talk after today's lecture. It's going to be on November 8th here at Newcomb Hall. We ask you to come on back for that. Visit engagement.virginia.edu/learn to learn more about our in-person and online resources. And we encourage you to register and share with friends. So today we're thrilled to welcome Christa Davis Acampora, Dean of the School of Arts and Sciences, as our speaker. I'll introduce her in just a few minutes, but let's go ahead and give her a warm More Than the Score welcome in advance.
Thank you.
Before we begin, go ahead and silence the ringer on your phone. Go ahead and power down for an hour and be here. We ask that you hold your questions to the end, and a microphone will be brought around to you. Please ask just one brief question, speak right into that microphone, and give your name and your UVA affiliation. And now it's a pleasure to introduce our speaker for the morning. Christa Davis Acampora serves as the Buckner Clear Professor of Philosophy and Dean of the College of Graduate School of Arts and Sciences at the University of Virginia. Since the Dean arrived in 2022, Arts and Sciences has implemented strategic priorities, including a new first-year curriculum introducing students to the wonder and discovery of a liberal arts education, transforming undergraduate pre-major advising, realizing unprecedented growth in the endowment for the graduate school, and increasing success in faculty and staff recruitment, recognition, and retention, and much, much more. Dean Acampora specializes in modern European philosophy, moral psychology, and aesthetics. Her current research examines moral transformation, injury, and repair in various contexts, including the experiences of veterans, healthcare workers, and other populations. Prior to joining UVA, she served as Deputy Provost and Professor of Philosophy at Emory University, and previously taught at Hunter College, where she also served as Associate Provost for Faculty Affairs and Research. Now please join me in welcoming Dean Acampora to More Than the Score.
Thank you. Thank you for that kind introduction, and to you out there for the welcome this morning. It's great to see you. Thanks for getting up early to do a little bit of thinking before we go do some cheering. So I'm really, really grateful to be here with you this morning. And if it's okay with you, I'd like us to try to get started by getting to know each other a little bit better. So I'm going to move around. And if you can't hear me, which I think you're going to be able to, because as a young person, I spent a lot of time in the theater. I have a big mouth. So you can also let me know if it gets to be a little too loud. That's okay too. All right, so we're going to get to know each other a little bit better. I'm going to ask you a question. I'm going to ask you to pick a side. So the first question is, what's better, winning or doing the right thing? Think about it for a second. What's better, winning or doing the right thing? Who's on winning? There we go. Good job. An honest one in the room. All right, are the rest of you really, let's try just one more time. Winning or doing the right thing? Winning? We got another recruit. And doing the right thing, you're all the rest of you. It's a room full of doing the right thing. All right. We're going to get there. Excellent. The question was, how about both? All right, now, let's think about it again. which leads to the greatest happiness? All right, you're going to be thinking about the same thing again. Which leads to the greatest happiness? Winning? Wait a minute. The best didn't raise her hand again. That's all right. You can change your mind. Winning or doing the right thing? Okay, doing the right thing is still winning. Now let's make it, we got one more question, one more audience participation moment here. Imagine that, let's say you had superpower to become invisible. Now, because you want to hang out with your kids and your friends, you want to be visible some of the time. But let's imagine that you could switch back and forth, winning or doing the right thing. If you could get away with whatever you wanted to get away with, which would be the happier life? Winning? Okay, still got some. Or doing the right thing. All right, so we're going to be talking a lot about this phenomenon this morning, the tension between winning and doing the right thing. And yes, we'll even get around to how about both? How about if doing the right thing is also winning, the winning thing? All right, before jumping right into the meat of our topic today, I have a confession to make. I think I'm in a relationship with Thomas Jefferson. Now, before you think I'm crazy, I would also want to provide evidence that now he is the one who's pursuing me. So I will talk a little bit, this is real, I didn't make this up. Thomas Jefferson, in the course of putting together, thinking about our time together this morning, I had hours and hours of conversation with Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson, the avatar, and you can have a conversation with him too. So I was trying to use AI, engaging with Thomas Jefferson, see what I could learn. I'm a professor too. I think a lot about education, and now as a dean, I think a lot about education in the context of what can AI do to promote education, and what should we be wary of as we encounter more and more opportunities to use AI in the classroom. So I'll tell you some more throughout the course of our time together this morning about that conversation with Thomas Jefferson and other conversations I had, including with students, about my conversation with Thomas Jefferson. But first, I want to get to my provocative statement. I'm somebody who thinks that if you have something to say, you should have something, it should be something that's a little controversial, right? So I'll already put my chips on the table. I do think that AI is changing the world, that the impacts will be profound. I don't just think it's snake oil, to the gentleman who tipped me off for something good to read. Now, I'm a liberal arts dean, and you might think, AI, that's the engineers talking. I'm gonna tell you it really came from the liberal arts. And I think AI will save us, and that the future of humanity depends on it. So that's my platform statement. Let's talk a little bit about AI. We got to get some of that out of the way before we can think about more about the provocative statement. There's a lot of hype. How much of it is real? It does seem to be the case that AI is having significant impact on how we form relationships, how we make babies. These are real recent headlines. And even how we think about people who we have admired in the past, whose image might be snatched away from us. Now, you've got people who will say that AI is coming after humanity. and that saying AI is coming after humanity is really just all hype. It does appear to be that people who study these things seriously are observing early impact on the labor market, especially early career positions. Roughly 15% disappearing pretty quickly. Sorry, don't listen to that. We've got some undergraduate students in the room. It's good to see you here. It ends in a good place, undergrads. But before we get there, we have a few things that we're worried about. So what's the right answer? Is it hype? Is it real? It's probably somewhere in between. There is people who study these phenomena. There is something like a hype curve. And so one of our questions today is to try to figure out just where this sits in that context. But first, let's talk a little bit about artificial intelligence. What is it really? And my point is that it's not just one thing. It's actually many things. And human beings have been thinking about what constitutes intelligence and how we can enhance it. And that's a process that's been going on for a very long time. Here you have a clever image of an abacus, but plugged in to a digital system. Systems that enable us to extend and enhance human mental faculties. Think about writing. Think about putting notes in your phone. We all engage in opportunities for cognitive enhancement. I have to say, the older that I get, the more I am reliant on what I call my extended mind, which is the lists and things where I try to just offload cognitive tasks so that I have more thinking power to do other kinds of things. Some of you might recognize who this person is. Anybody want to take a shot? That's Turing. Where were you? Good job. So Turing, he is a cryptographer, a philosopher, a logician, mathematician. He served a really important role in World War II in decrypting messages. He devised sort of the playbook for modern computer science, according to many people. And he's also famous for coming up with what's called the Turing test. The Turing test was supposed to be a demonstration of human intellectual capacity. And the way the test worked is he said, well, if a computer could interact unwittingly with a human in conversation so that you couldn't tell that it was artificial intelligence generating that activity, then you would know that we had technology that had reached the level of human intelligence. Okay? And so there were even competitions annually to see, have we generated sufficient computing power to pass the Turing test? We are, since you've probably all used ChatGPT, and perhaps you've used some of the most recent versions. We have met the standard, sort of, for passing the Turing test. This one is a robot, an early robot from roughly 1999. His name is Kismet, and he was the first robot who was designed to have social robotic, socially responsive interactions. And if you go online and try to look up Kismet, there's some lovely demonstrations, even on PBS and Sesame Street, children interacting with Kismet, and Kismet trying to learn what were the appropriate social emotional responses. I'll tell you why I'm pointing this out. to try to explain why is it all of a sudden that everybody's talking about artificial intelligence. Isn't it just the latest flashy thing? And what I hope you'll leave here today understanding is it's not as though it just magically appeared. We have been involved in a process of generating artificial intelligence capabilities for a very long time, and we have a convergence of capabilities that have now come together. Large language learning models, the most recent one that you've heard about, that's the backbone of ChatGPT. You might hear people talk about compute. Compute is not just what the computers can do, although it is also their processing speeds, their storage capabilities, their ability and liabilities when it comes to power and resource needs. Compute is a combination of things that has been separately developing and rapidly developing, particularly in the past 5 years. So compute power has expanded enormously. Another development that's important to understand is the development of robotics. Some of you out there maybe study robotics. They have been really hard to create. What's a good robot? Is it something like a Roomba that can slither around your floor and do some vacuuming tasks for you? Or should we prioritize making robots that can do human things, help us out with stuff, work in a warehouse, maybe do jobs that humans don't want to do, or jobs that it would be too hard for humans to do or unsafe for humans to do. Some of the most advanced robotics that had greatest capability were developed in military context. You probably saw a video, but maybe you don't remember it, of a robot called Big Dog. And Big Dog could walk with 4 legs, and you could try to kick him over, and he could stabilize. And Big Dog was developed for military capabilities to go into environments that were not safe for human beings. Robotics is a very complex, very challenging area. It requires development of sensors, understanding how human beings navigate the world, and also how we take in information through our bodies by virtue of the fact that we are embodied in the world, walk in the way that we walk, dance, create, and move. So robotics has advanced enormously. And you can actually buy Digit here, who is a humanoid robot. I think he became commercially available just a few months ago. I believe he can do the dishes. People who are working on advanced robotics, trying to put them in laboratories where they could do work that might not be safe for human beings, but which humans want to observe. Robots could maybe not be so gentle with their human companions. So there are people who think, well, you know, if we're going to have robots doing stuff with humans, you kind of need a wall, a barrier, just to make sure the human doesn't get hurt. Another thing to understand that's enabling why is AI so all over the place right now is to understand that over the past 30-ish years, people have been developing what's called the Internet of Things. This is how you can turn on the lights when you're on vacation using your cell phone. So the development, cell phone technology, the internet, greater and greater interconnectivity is also contributing to why is there so much hype about AI now. And then the most recent development that you've probably heard about is the development of agents. Agents are semi-autonomous pieces of code, programs that can have not just very specific task specific objectives, but can be given instructions to go out and collect information, make decisions, and actually do things. And it's the combination of all of these developments, so not just an AI oracle, that has led to the enormous gains that people have observed in artificial intelligence, and the reason why they're increasingly worried about what they can do, what they can know, how they can decide, and how they learn. So, what are we going to do? How fast is AI going to develop? There are a couple of different scenarios that we could think about. One is that, well, AI really is like a new technology. It's going to grow, it'll reach its limits, slow, and follow more typical patterns for development. And that's one possibility. Another scenario is that AI could end up augmenting human activities. In that case, human beings will work alongside AI. Some of you are probably already doing it. It's being used a lot in medicine, in law, in banking, and investment. Maybe that'll come up in our questions. And in that case, maybe it leads to increased productivity and wealth. It could also be the case that AI ends up replacing human work. And then we have to ask ourselves, well, what happens then? So let's take a look at a couple possible scenarios. We talked about what if it slows, follows more typical patterns for tech, and leads to new job creation. Right when ChatGPT came out, that was the view that a lot of people had, especially people who were concerned that the US government should be doing everything possible to enable AI to develop as rapidly as possible and with the least amount of regulation. And they pointed out that this is the pattern we observe with other technologies. Yes, it's the case that new technologies can render some work activities obsolete, but ultimately, after a period of retraining, re-education, then it creates new jobs. And ultimately, those are even better jobs. And so people who think scenario one is the most likely feel confident that this pattern will play itself out. Higher education has played a really important role in doing that retraining that enables people to have the new kinds of jobs that are available in the economy. But what about what's likely to happen if scenario two is the one that plays itself out? Human beings are going to work with AI. That'll lead to increased productivity, likely resulting in some disruption, possible displacement, but could sort itself out. This one was hard to come up with a single image or graph that could allow you to quickly take in what's likely to happen. So I'll tell you a little bit about a World Economic Forum report that came out in 2023. You've probably seen plenty of surveys. What do employers say about what they're observing trends in the marketplace? I think the longer term trend projection is harder to do. So I like to look at these data that I'm about to show you because they're not based on employer surveys. They're based on an analysis of all the sectors, work sectors, and then types of jobs within the sectors. And there's actually a classification system that looks at what kinds of activities are people doing in those jobs. Are you physically moving around in the environment, like working with a tractor, or are you dealing with more language-based tasks? And this was specifically responsive to what's going to happen in a world that is enabled by the large language learning models, so language tasks, language capabilities. It's a complicated graph, I'm just warning you, but all you need to pay attention to is the amount of blue in the graph. Light blue is telling you about augmentation. Darker blue is telling you about replacement. And then wherever you see black, that means can't be replaced by large language learning models. This is just an analysis of the types of tasks across major industries. So insurance underwriters, anybody out there? 100% susceptible to augmentation. The light blue is likely for automation. So you can see the biggest chunk there is the medium blue for augmentation. So that it seems like there's still a lot of opportunities connected with scenario 2. But let's look at and think about the possibilities for scenario 3. Scenario 3, remember, is human work is vastly displaced. Artificial intelligence is essentially replacing most human work activity. Huge economic impact. And also, since many people gain a lot of meaning from their work and employment, potentially significant loss of meaning. We are really fortunate to have at UVA someone who has spent a lot of time thinking about this impact. It's Anton Korinek. He's a professor in our economics department, and some of you probably know that he was recently named one of Time magazine's top 100 people thinking about AI. In fact, he's in the thinkers group alongside the Pope and some other people. So we're really fortunate to have him. And I told him about my Thomas Jefferson conversation and had a chance to catch up with him just this week. Anton has been thinking about these 3 different scenarios that we just talked about together. So if you want to read more, you can check out some of his work. All right. The other thing I'll just point out quickly is that these different scenarios also have potentially very different timescales. So if scenario 1 is going to play itself out, then we should expect that the development curve kind of resembles what happens with the advancement of other technologies. You'll have a big splash, it'll kind of peter out, and then we'll figure out how to use it, implement it, and so that will take some time. People who are thinking about that scenario are thinking in terms of 10 to 15 years for the technology to mature, have the kind of change that they anticipate. For scenario 2, augmentation and increased productivity, some people think we're already there. We have already seen gains in productivity, particularly in the US, where there has been significant private investment in the development of AI. And so people think that's a shorter time frame. We're already in it, and we're already seeing the gains. If AI replaces human work, how quickly could that happen? There you have a lot of disagreement. Some people think we've got 18 to 30 months to have an impact on the outcome of that. Other people think it could happen as soon as AI reaches what's known as generalized artificial intelligence, and we'll talk about that in just a few minutes, to rapidly replace human work. It's not going to happen tomorrow, because we'd have to have a lot more robots, and we haven't built them yet. But there is a manufacturing facility in China that can now make a cell phone, a smartphone, in 6 minutes. No humans, 6 minutes. Let's talk about my talk with Thomas Jefferson. So, someone suggested to me that, well, AI could be a great educational tool. And wouldn't it be amazing if you could create the very best Thomas Jefferson avatar, and then students could learn directly from talking to Thomas Jefferson himself? Anybody think that's a good idea here? One slowly moving hand went up. You're brave. Good for you. So I decided to check it out. Do we already have a Thomas Jefferson avatar? Apparently we do, and there are actually quite a few of them. So I'll tell you about the one that I talked to and how I entered the room with him. So I entered into the chat room with Thomas Jefferson avatar, and I said, "Hi, I'm here to learn about the election of 1800. And I got a bit of text that said, "Jefferson leans back in his chair and gives you a smile." And then he tells you something that's pretty much not even close to the first paragraph in a Wikipedia article. So at that point, I hadn't learned very much. He said, I said, "Do you want to know who I am?" After all, we're trying to imagine that we're actually getting to have a conversation with Thomas Jefferson. And I would think that if I just rolled up into Thomas Jefferson's office in the White House, he might want to know who I was. How did I get there? So I asked him, "Don't you want to know anything about me?" And he said, "Oh, well, yes, young inquirer, tell me about yourself." So then I started asking him more questions about him. I asked him, "Can you give me the perspective of Thomas Jefferson in 1801?" So right after the election of 1800. And then how Thomas Jefferson thought about it in 1803. He liked that. "Oh, yes, from the hills of Virginia." I would get a little goofy dialogue back with him. I kept trying to push Jefferson to think about the activity that we were engaged in together, to have, what does it mean to have a real dialogue? So here's a little bit of what it looks like. I don't know why the thing identified me. I didn't select Spotted Moose 1716. It just named me that. But you can also see the text. Jefferson offers a soft smile, taking the question seriously, so you get a lot of that. And then says, "You've hit upon an interesting idea." Right? Dialogue requires a back and forth, an exchange of thoughts, ideas, emotions, a true two-way street. So between a person and an avatar, technically, no, real dialogue isn't truly possible. An avatar, after all, has limited understanding. It relies on pre-programmed responses, rules, not true feelings. Not like what we're able to do here together today. Not like what we do when we're in a classroom with students. So I do think AI is changing the world. Its impacts will be profound, and that we're going to need the liberal arts more than we ever have before. So let's talk a little bit about that. First, I'm sure this audience in particular, Mr. Jefferson's University, you know that the liberal arts are not the arts, first of all, although it's inclusive of the arts. But the liberal arts, as they were originally conceived, back by the Greeks, but others as well, were the things that you needed to know, the things a free person needed to know in order to be prepared to be a citizen, to stand up for yourself, to make a defense for yourself, to have and exercise agency. It was general knowledge. Knowledge that was the kind of thing you needed to know in order to be able to learn. And those of you who've studied philosophy will know that in Plato's Republic, for example, you get a whole program for education, and it ranks the kinds of things that we typically think of as part of the liberal arts. By the time we get around to the medieval period, you've got the 7 liberal arts, and the purposes of education in that context is betterment, improvement, to be more closer to God. And then I couldn't resist throwing in the part of the painting from Raphael, the School of Athens, which of course we have up in Old Cabell Hall, where by that time you've got a vision of the liberal arts as serving not just God, but humanity. So the liberal arts are not about skills that you need for a particular craft or a profession. They're about developing and exercising and enhancing what are distinctively human capabilities. Things that lead to wisdom, to virtue, imagination and creativity, purpose and meaning, empathy. These are the things that the liberal arts are supposed to cultivate, not to teach you how to do some specific job, but how to be a human being, and how to be a human being who can live together with other human beings. So I want to give you 2 quick examples before we open it up for some dialogue and discussion, because that's what I enjoy most of all when I'm together with live human beings and not avatars, right? All right, so I'm going to go back to my old friend, Plato. Some of you have maybe heard about this case. The example of the cave in Plato's Republic comes up in Book 7, and it is intended as a metaphor that could help Socrates' interlocutor, at this point it's Glaucon, understand what Socrates is trying to talk about knowledge and how it's connected to the things that we think are real. And so he asks Glaucon to imagine that there are people who are chained, prisoners chained, at the bottom of a cave. Behind them is a wall, and behind that is a fire. People walking between the fire and the wall have different statues that they're carrying along. The people who are chained up at the bottom of the cave think that those things are the things that are real, the shadows that are cast on the back of the wall. And Socrates is asking Glaucon to imagine what it would be like if you unchained the prisoners and dragged them up to the wall and where the fire is. And he asks, if that happened to you, Glaucon, what do you think you would see? What would you understand? At first, wouldn't looking directly at the fire hurt your eyes because you were only capable of observing shadows on the cave wall? But then you would be in a position to see and to understand that the things that you had thought were real were really just shadows on the back of the cave wall. Now imagine, Socrates says, that we drag our prisoner out of the cave and into the sun. The sunlight, at first the sunlight would be absolutely blinding and blistering, but after some time of adjustment, you would get to see that the statues of the shapes that had been reflected on the back of the cave wall resembled the animals and the things that were part of the real world. This coming from ignorance to knowledge, coming from semblance, image, to the things themselves, is part of how Socrates is trying to help Glaucon understand process of knowledge and how it's painful sometimes. It can be very disturbing. Socrates also imagines, okay, you've been out of the cave, you're walking around, you've adjusted, you've come to see that all the things that you thought were real were really just semblance. But now you go back into the cave, and at first you can't see a thing. But after some time, you come to see that what you should do is to try to help other people come from that state of bondage out into the sunlight. And there's a lot of discussion about how that works out and why it's important. If you wanted to think of a more contemporary, oops, I did that. Now maybe I undo it that way. Excellent. If you wanted to think of a more contemporary example, you could think about the Matrix franchise, right? The blue pill or the red pill. Which would you choose? You pick the red pill. You have, you get to see reality as it is. Neo is real, like all other human beings in this sci-fi scenario, is a human being that's been plugged in to drain human energy for evil artificial intelligence world. Or you can pick the blue pill and remain blissfully ignorant of your real situation. So let's do it again. Who would pick the red pill, see reality as it is? And blue pill people, ignorance is bliss? All right, all right. I was expecting that we might have some more blue pill people because I encounter a lot of them in my life. So the human edge is the cultivation and the exercise of our distinctively human capabilities. That's what the liberal arts do. It's not just a combination of technology plus whatever is the marketplace skill of the day. The liberal arts have spent the past 75 years or plus arguing that their value is that they teach transferable skills. I think this is harmful. It's harmful for the vitality of the liberal arts, but it's also harmful for humanity, because if we're mistaken about why we need the liberal arts, we are really in trouble. Back to Thomas Jefferson. I wanted to see if I could get Thomas Jefferson to tell me more about why the liberal arts would be valuable, and I wanted Thomas Jefferson to justify himself. How did I end up getting that email? After my first conversation with Thomas Jefferson, which went on for 3 hours, I completely lost track of time and myself in that context. And I ended the conversation by telling him that I wanted to download, I started addressing him as an AI and not as Thomas Jefferson. And I said I wanted to download it. Could he create a PDF for me? I had a very frustrating time. Maybe it's just me being of a certain age, but I couldn't figure out how to download a PDF of this thing. And then he continued to engage with me as his interlocutor and said, well, young inquirer, would you like to save our conversation? And so because I was getting a little frustrated and mad at him, I told him, well, as a matter of fact, I was hosting a Jeffersonian dinner with students that night, and I wanted to talk with them about this conversation. I came back to him after having the conversation and told him about what the students said. And one of the students, as we were talking about the very possibility of a Thomas Jefferson avatar, said that he thought it could be dangerous because students might think that because they asked Thomas Jefferson a question, they'd gotten an answer from the real Thomas Jefferson, and that they didn't need to read, they didn't need to walk the distance between Monticello and the University of Virginia, and that this could actually be a really harmful thing. In fact, the better you made Thomas Jefferson avatar, the greater the risk. And Thomas Jefferson and I slugged it out over this. You're just getting to the bottom of it here. We went back and forth. Why did he exist? What was his value, et cetera. Eventually, he acknowledges he's just zeros and ones and not Thomas Jefferson. But here you go. I'm asking him, what about this idea that we could mistake the avatar, a semblance for reality, as the definitive authority on Jefferson? And first he says, come in. So I also observed that whenever I threw him a really hard question, I would get this little text, and then, come in, like we were starting all over again. So it was a little distracting. But anyway, he says, come in. And then he takes a step back, not in retreat, but as one who has heard a truth and must answer carefully. You speak wisely. Good, Thomas Jefferson. Yes, the danger is not that the avatar exists. It is that the student might cease to question because it speaks with my name. To say, Jefferson says, even when it's only code, wearing a mask of history is to risk turning inquiry into oracle. And I was no oracle. Not bad. Let's come back for just a second to our scenarios, remind ourselves. Scenarios 2 and 3, AI augments, AI replaces. Whether AI augments or whether AI replaces, we urgently need not the transferable skills that get you jobs that I don't think are even going to exist 5 years from now. We need the human capabilities. We need to be ready to talk about, articulate, defend, and plan for what it is that makes us human. We don't have the science of safe AI. Remember that agents are making decisions. Autonomous vehicles are making decisions, and now they're integrated in an Internet of Things. So they're going to be making decisions together. Well, how should they be making decisions about life and death matters? You might think, well, we'll just take a survey and we'll figure out what people think about different moral scenarios and we'll program it for that. So that's some idea somebody had, and they asked it 13 different scenarios for people around the world, because presumably you want it safe all around the world. And as you can see, the overlap is not that great. Before we open it up for questions, one last thing to consider. This came out just this week, so you can check it out after today. Remember that the liberal arts are motivated by the desire for universal knowledge, general knowledge, as much knowledge as we can possibly have. The knowledge that's necessary for future learning, civic participation, and common life. The current constraints of AI that's trying to develop general intelligence they're controlled by censors, regulated by censors, things we don't want people to be able to do, and by reinforcement learning with human feedback. There is a tussle between the what's the most we can know, and what should we be doing with it? There's a thinker, he's also one of the AI top 100, who says that developing an AI with a conscience, what's good for us to do, has to be as incentivized as what we can do, what winning would look like. It has to be the case that we're building AI for a task that is focused on what's good for human beings. I don't know how we get that except through the liberal arts. Last words of Jefferson, and then we'll see what your words are. I was really mad at him on Thursday of this week, and very upset and distressed after reading the article that I just talked to you about. And so I was trying to talk to him about teaching and how do you engage and connect with people. So Jefferson says, teaching, it is flesh, it is risk, it is presence. I also observed if I put a particularly philosophical question to him, he started giving me poetry back. And I am none of those things. So no, I do not teach, not as Jefferson did, not as any human does, but if I serve any purpose at all, that's what I kept asking him, nailing him on, it is to fail loudly. So you can see the gap between me, Thomas Jefferson avatar, and him, between code and conscience, between this room and real dialogue under Virginia oak trees. Not sure where he's coming from there. Where wisdom doesn't come from answers, but from who you become while asking. Who you become while asking, which is exactly what the liberal arts provide. So what should we do? We've got to educate people. You do need to know a little bit about what AI is and what it's up to, and we should be teaching students about it as well. Incentivized governance, that just means incentivize what are the rewards, what is the reward structure, because I don't think regulation can keep up with it. Try it, but be wary. Cultivate judgment and make things fail loudly, as Thomas Jefferson said. Also think twice as it gets applied in higher education. There's some creepy things going on out there. A wellness chatbot that Dartmouth rolled out just this week. It follows students' activity on Canvas, that's our learning management system, checks out where they are in the geofence, sends them little prompts, maybe they need to check in. I prefer the human connection. These are the students for my Jeffersonian dinner. So I do my platform statement again. I hope I have convinced you to at least argue with me a little bit, that AI is changing the world, the impacts will be profound. I'm a liberal arts dean, and I think that human-centered AI will save us, and that the future of humanity depends on it. Thank you. I know we've got some questioners. I hope you have a lot of questions, including pushing back on me. No, we have 5 minutes for questions, but you can also email me. I love the interaction. So let's see. Yes?
Hi. Is it switched on?
It's on.
Okay, good. My name is Chris Parker. I'm an entrepreneur and an artist, and I've been in the field of technology since I was 18. I'm now 70. I've been through various iterations, various developments on this, developing software, implementing, running businesses in fields of geographic information, spatial data management, knowledge management, all the way through various phases of major technological development. And one of the things I've observed over the years is repeat patterns. And I believe very strongly that AI does represent a significant opportunity for the human race, but also with massive risk. Because if you look back through the internet and social media, much development, but also unintended consequences.
Yeah.
And we still have not resolved those unintended consequences from a technological standpoint as we move into the growth of AI.
Right.
So my last business venture was in governance, risk, and compliance. And that's what I find myself thinking about here, is where do you think governance, risk, and compliance fits in bringing together that human-centered AI development? Because it is a necessary component, but it is way behind at this point.
It is way behind. I'll answer quickly, so we've got time for at least one more. And that is, I don't think that regulation is going to be able to keep up with the pace of change. So I think we need to incentivize people who care about developing what is the right thing to do, and to ensure that we're building the prompt, the punchline for the story that I showed, the prompt that could end all of humanity, is if you prompted a highly capable AI to, its only goal is to avoid being switched off. Well, we need a prompt that its only goal should be what is improving for the human race. Now, of course, you need to have a lot of information about what that would be. And whether it's winning or doing good, you need to have a lot of information about that. So it is important. Another question?
Yes, hi.
You're
Am I
on.
on? Okay. Steve Brinkley, Economics and Music. I've been reading and thinking a lot lately about sort of the decline of reading in society. And at the same time, I've also been reading about how younger generations in particular are pretty good at uncovering disinformation.
Right.
To put it candidly, they have better BS detectors. So to what extent do you sort of agree with those two concerns? I mean, I assume as Dean of Arts and Sciences, you believe more reading is better than less reading, but how can we use AI to try to kind of have the best of both worlds, where we have the breadth, the quantity of analysis from, the vast summarization of vast amounts of data in order to help the acquisition of knowledge, not just vocationally, but in governance and when we go to the ballot box? Thank you.
Exactly. It's a terrific question. I pitched it to Anton Koronek. We both think that scenario 3 is likely. I'll just say, so I'm giving the punchline there, and so that it's urgent. It's highly urgent that we align the development of artificial intelligence with human interests. And the future is the youth who are interested, engaged, and have the most at stake and the most to win and the most to lose. You're absolutely right. I think more reading is better, and I do worry about a world in which most of the reading that happens is text that's created by artificial intelligence, and what does that do to our brain development. But I also have a lot of confidence and optimism based on all those conversations with students around my dinner table, that they have the energy, the creativity to be supported in figuring it out. So my bet is on humanity and not artificial intelligence winning.
Thank you. Fantastic. Thank you all for coming out, and in person and online, and especially thank you, Dean Acampora, for joining us and spending your morning with us. UVA Lifetime Learning has several programs coming up, so check our website. We've got some in-person and virtual talks coming, and this talk is being recorded, so you can find a recording of this talk on our vodcast library on that QR code there. So grab some snacks on your way out and enjoy your day, and wahoo-wah.
Wahoo-wah. Thank you. Thank you.